Now, for young Israelis who are not connected to Torah and not connected to the or disconnected from the kind of spiritual value of Eretz Israel, they still have the intuition that somewhere there's a place where there's a vibe, where when you're there, you can connect somehow to Hashem. If you'd like to actually go and take a look at the source sheet, even have it in front of you as you're listening to the shiur, go to our website, which is HebrewLearningCircles.org. Go to Jewish Resources, scroll down to Parsha Videos, and you'll find the source sheet right there. But what is the meaning of the word Goshen, the name of the region of Egypt in which Jacob's family settled? And we'll see that it actually shares a root with the name of the Parsha, VaYigash. VaYigash Goshen, it's the same root. When Jacob immigrated to Egypt, was he concerned about moving away from his God? And we'll see that the Ishbitzer brings a Gemara on that and answers the question: does a Jew need to be in Israel in order to connect with God?
This week's Parsha, the second to last Parsha in the first book of Bereshis, we have Yosef revealing himself finally to his brothers, and we have the reuniting of the family. Yosef's father, Yaakov Avinu, also known as Israel, is brought down, and there's a reunification of the family. And as we're going to be touching on over here, they settled in the land of Egypt, the whole family, 70 people settling in the land of Egypt in a town called Goshen, which was a separate area specifically set apart for the Jewish people to live in. We're going to be talking about, the question is, how is Yaakov, the whole story of Bereshis, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, beginning the settlement of the land of Israel, and the promises, the multitude of promises from God, that this is the land of the Jewish people, Lech Lecha, etc. Now, all of a sudden, the entire nucleus of this family has resettled outside of the land of Israel in Egypt, which we know is the source of all impurity in the world in Kabbalistic talking. Right. How will the family function spiritually, optimally, outside of the land of Israel?
I just want to point people to the very last verse. It's Genesis 47, verse 27. And so they're arriving at the land of Goshen, and the verse says, Vayeshev Yisrael be'eretz Mitzrayim be'eretz Goshen. Thus Israel / Jacob or Yaakov settled in the country of Egypt in the region of Goshen. And then it says, Vayachzuba, Vayfru, Vayirbu Mod. They acquired holding in it and were fertile and increased greatly. Those are the good days of the beginning of their settlement in Egypt. Liot ki Yaakov Avinu haya mityareh leilech lechutz laaretz. And he says, this is the fact is that Yaakov Avinu, Yaakov, our forefather, was afraid to leave Israel, to go outside of Israel. But here the Ishbitzer brings a Gemara, and that's in Ketubot 110 on the second side of the page. It says, Kol hadar be'eretz Yisrael domeh kemi sheyesh lo Elokim v'chulei. And so the Gemara states that when you live in the land of Israel, you are as if he has a God. And all who live outside of Israel is assumed to be as one who does not have a God. And I think what he's telling us here is that Yaakov knows that Yaakov operates in that mindset.
It's given in the context over there at the end of Kesuvos of this tractate. It goes on and on. It starts off with a law, of course, in the Mishnah. The law says that it also has to do with relationship between husband and wife. It says that if you're living in Israel and you want to leave for whatever reason, you have a good business opportunity in Texas, but your wife doesn't want to go. So if you were living in Canada and you wanted to move to Texas and your wife doesn't want to go, you can fight with your wife and you can argue with her and you can make her go. You can convince her that what do we need here? I want to go there and make some money. But if you're living in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, and you want to go for a good reason, whatever it is. But your wife says, no, I don't want to leave Eretz Yisrael. You're not allowed to make her. All of a sudden it hits you over the head and it says, anyone who lives outside of Israel is God. As if, Kimmi, of course, it's not that he doesn't have a God. It's almost as if, and it's a very strong thing. And people struggle with it. Wow, how could you say that, and I'm living in Poland or I'm living in New York City. I've got 20,000 kosher restaurants. What are you talking about? I've got a big shul with fancy bima.
Yeah.
How can you say that?
And remember who says it. It's a Babylonian Talmud. So they say it when they're living in Babylonia.
Right. It wasn't about the other guy. It was about, they were talking about themselves,
Yeah.
So everyone tries to come up with the teretz, and it doesn't mean it. It really means this. So the answer is, Reb Ruvain, they meant it. They meant it. They meant it. In other words, it's almost as if, Israel is so special, physically and spiritually, that it's almost as if, right? That's the point of the Gemara. They meant it.
Yeah,
so that's why he's bringing this Gemara, because what's Yaakov doing? In other words, what did Hashem, you said before about the promises, what did God tell Yaakov Avinu? Ufaratzta yamav v'kei v'negba. This whole thing is yours. You're going to spread out and everything. He got the whole, Avram Avinu was saying, your descendants. But he told Yaakov, Ufaratzta.
Yeah.
It's all yours, baby. All of a sudden, and then the last pasuk, as he quotes the last pasuk, VaYigash, and he settled in. He settled in. Whoa! It's like, what are you settling in? You're going to be here for a long time?
ואמר לו השם יתברך, כי בכל מקום שאתה שם, הוא קדוש בקדושת ארץ ישראל. And says the Ishbitzer, and the Holy One, blessed be, said to him, in every place or any place where you are, that place has the holiness of the land of Israel. This is God answering, according to this Ishbitzer, answering Jacob's fear. וזה פירוש וישב Israel be'eretz Yisrael be'eretz VaYigash. And he says, and this is the meaning of why the Torah says that he quotes again, and Israel settled in the land of Egypt in the region of Goshen. Hainu, meaning, she'af be'eretz Mitzrayim haya karov l'Hashem yitbarach, that even in Egypt he was close to the Holy One, blessed be, and that place too was holy. And now he's explaining it linguistically, ki Goshen hi lashon itkarvut, because the word Goshen means to come close. And how do we see that? Look at the first word of the name of the Pasha, VaYigash Yehuda, right? So Yehuda comes close to Yosef, and it's the same root exactly. And Goshen means to come close. So Dafka in Goshen in Mitzrayim, he can also come close to his God.
There's a famous story, I'm sure you've heard of it, where there was a chassid. This was during the first emigration of the Chassidim to the land of Israel in the late 1700s, early 1800s. The first emigration, Vitebsk, etc. And there was a chassid who wanted to go to Israel, and something happened to his plans. His plans fell through, and he was crying to his Rebbe that he couldn't go. And the Hasidic Rebbe said famously, Mach Eretz Yisrael da. In Yiddish, he told him, make here
Israel here. Yeah.
Make Israel here. What do you mean? He doesn't mean that the little shtetl in Poland is Israel. Nobody's saying that. He's saying, you can't go, okay, you're here. Make here as if it were Israel.
Right.
Pray, learn, do mitzvahs, get close to God. Nothing's stopping you from reaching as high as you can reach wherever you are. And this is a great lesson of encouragement for all of us. Because if you notice, Yisrael, Be'eretz Mitzrayim, and everyone knows that the word Egypt, Mitzrayim, comes from the word Meitzar in Hebrew, which means constricted consciousness, a constricted area. So we all find ourselves in a state of constricted consciousness at times when we can't break through and reach our potential. And you have to settle with what you have. And then once you settle, once you make peace with who you are and what you are, then you can begin to grow and burst through those self-imposed boundaries.
The narrowness. Many years ago, it was 15 years ago or so, I went with my wife at the time, and we both we called him up. Actually, she called the Rebbitzin and asked if we can come for lunch after Shacharit at the Kotel. He would daven. He had a minyan at the Kotel every Shabbat, and he was known as a Kabbalist. He was known as somebody who was very versed in in Kabbalistic practices such as meditation, and people who were interested in Jewish meditation would go to him a lot. So we go for lunch, and guess what? His apartment is a small apartment. And Rebelli, you had 40 people squeezed in there, like literally like sardines in a can. It's like, if you can't imagine how many people could be squeezed around at a Shabbos table,
Right.
And there was, when I was there was I guess it was a rabbi from the States who was a rabbi of some big conservative congregation somewhere, who was visiting. They just happened to be visiting. My wife and I were, we were not the guests of honors. We were like the schleppers, at the side of the room. There was somebody there who was like a guest of honor. Apparently, he sat right next to the rabbi, next to the rabbi of the Kotel, and the rabbi gave a Dvar Torah at the table, and he said that there are those who live in Eretz Yisrael who are as if they're in exile, and there's those who live in America as if they're living in Eretz Yisrael, and that was his compliment to this guest.
Right, and of course the reverse of that is true as well, and a person has to be careful. There were a lot of people that were told, that asked the Rebbe that they wanted to go up to Eretz Yisrael to make Aliyah, and they were told, you know what? If now you're living in a gutter. So if you're wearing shmatas and you're living in a gutter, your shmatas can get dirty. But if you want to go move into a room in the palace of the king, and you're dressed in shmatas,
you got to clean up.
So you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that it could work in reverse too. Yeah. So if a person is going in because he wants a pickle on a falafel on a nice beach,
that's not the reason. Yeah.
That's if I want to go because the avir, because the literal environment of Eretz Yisrael makes a person can aid in a person's wisdom and spiritual growth because it's the center of the universe.
Right.
Then you go.
I think the Ishbitzer, maybe in good character, is actually arguing with the Gemara here. Maybe he's adding his own little and saying, really, yes, the Gemara says this, but here in our parsha we see that actually no. We're in Galut, just like Yaakov was in Galut, and there's nothing less for us if we create an Eretz Yisrael right there in Ishbitz or wherever they're living, right? And he's saying, don't take that Gemara too seriously. Relax. It's like you have everything you need right here, and in that way, it's a little controversial.
Right. I would disagree with that take. The Ishbitzer did say some controversial things, but I don't think he would throw away every Gemara, every Zohar, every Mishnah, every pasuk. Chazal is full of everyone knows, and he was a Makubal. He learned Chassidus and the Kabbalah. He understood what the Zohar says about Eretz Yisrael. Yaakov Avinu, we talked about his fear of moving out of the place where spirituality is right in front of your eyes to a place where there's a lot of darkness, where you have to find the light. But interestingly, the Medrash says that on the way to Eretz Mitzrayim, and remember there was a famine, he had to get down there, it was a let's go. He set up the wagons, let's go. He made a stop to cut down trees, to cut down cedar trees. And he brought wagons full of cedar trees, and he planted them. And our sages teach us that it's because he saw with his his Ruach HaKodesh, that in the future, that they would end up being exiled there for 210 years. But in the future, they would return. And when they returned, they would be in a desert. And in the desert, they would be told to build a Mishkan. And the Mishkan would require cedar wood. And where are they going to get cedar wood in the middle of the Sinai desert? You're not getting cedar wood. Not in the sand, not wood.
They
brought it with them.
Yeah.
So he went already with making practical preparations for going home. For going home. So we find ourselves, for whatever reason, self-imposed exile. We don't want to go. We can't go. But wherever we are, we should feel as if our lives are being lived in a way where I'm making preparation to go home.
Just what comes to mind is the reality of actually young people in Eretz Yisrael. Once it was me. I mean, once I was a young person in Eretz Yisrael. It's a little bit my experience. I had my own version many years ago when I didn't have gray hair, but you know that a lot of Israelis get spiritually seeking and go to India, for instance. Go to other places in the world, but will travel far, to find some spiritual system and some teacher somewhere else. And so what's interesting about that is that there is this sense that there is a location. Now, for young Israelis who are not connected to Torah and not connected to the or disconnected from the kind of spiritual value of Eretz Israel, they still have the intuition that somewhere there's a place where there's a vibe, where when you're there, you can connect somehow to Hashem, and they go. And a lot of these people then come back to Eretz Israel, and because they were outside looking for a place, then they discovered, that they were in that place all along. And then a lot of them come back to Torah, and you see that a lot. I mean, this is a real phenomenon of we are experiencing in our time. That's interesting, how that works. It's a little bit my personal story. I also learned, and practice the religions of the East before I've come back to claim my own seat at the table of our ancestors, Baruch Hashem. And I see that a little bit more with the Ishbitzer is saying, what he's bringing, that I don't know what he's basing when he says, he doesn't tell us the source, I don't know if he's basing that on a source or if that's his own commentary, right? Because I'm sorry, I want to translate that. He says, and God told Jacob that, he doesn't say it, but in parentheses, don't be afraid, right? Because Jacob had that fear. Every place that you go is holy, with the holiness of Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't devalue the holiness of Eretz Yisrael, but it means that sometimes you have to go somewhere else to be able to come back. At least that's what we see happening in our days. The main socket to plug in is right here at home in Eretz Israel for us, for the Jews. But there's alternate sockets anywhere you go, and that will teach you how to come back. I think we think of Israel more in political terms than in spiritual terms. It's something that generally most people I associate with, most people in the more liberal, world of Judaism, really, I think we don't understand enough the power of the place. Although people who go, from Birthright, people who go come back and say, I don't know what it is, but right? We hear that a lot. It defeats reason. You go, you come back, and what just happened? I just felt something, right? And we speak about it in so much in political terms, in practical terms, in geopolitical terms, and we don't have a good enough language for the godly umbilical cord. That's just hard to really put one's finger on. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in here, this wonderful learning with us, and God willing, we'll continue next week. Apropos, I will be in Eretz Israel next week, so we'll have a foot. Our shir here will have a foot there and a foot here. Thank you, Eli, for holding the God connection here. Well, shalom for now. Until next week. Click subscribe button. Doesn't cost you anything. We really appreciate that. Like to have that extra layer of connection with you. Like and subscribe. Come back next Wednesday, 9:00 in the morning.